Hey, welcome back. Today, we're going to talk about the silent treatment disguised as waiting for him to notice. Specifically, we're going to talk about why you refuse to tell your husband what's wrong and then blame him for not figuring it out. Because this is a pattern that's destroying marriages every single day. You know something's bothering you, you can feel it, you're carrying it around. But when your husband asks, "What's wrong?" you say nothing or "I'm fine." And then you're mad that he believes you. You're mad that he doesn't push harder. You're mad that he can't read between the lines. Because in your mind, if he really knew you, he'd know you're not fine. If he really cared, he'd see through the lie. So you're using "I'm fine" as a test. And when he accepts it at face value, he fails. And you use that failure as proof he doesn't understand you. Maybe people in your life have validated this. Maybe they've told you men should be more emotionally aware, but your husband isn't. And you sitting there waiting for him to become someone he's not is a waste of time. So here's what I need you to understand. Saying "I'm fine" when you're not is lying. And you're lying on purpose, then getting mad at him for believing the lie. Let me show you what this looks like in real life. You had plans to go out to dinner Friday night. You've been looking forward to it all week. But Thursday night, your husband tells you he scheduled a golf game with his buddies for Saturday morning and he needs to get up early, so maybe you should reschedule dinner. He says it casually, like it's no big deal. And to him, it probably isn't. But to you, you're crushed. You feel like he prioritized his friends over you. You feel like he doesn't value time with you. You feel dismissed and unimportant. So, what do? Do you say, "Actually, that really hurts my feelings. I've been looking forward to this all week and it feels like you're prioritizing golf over our relationship"? No, you don't say that. You say, "It's fine. We can reschedule." And your voice is flat. Your face shows you're not fine. But you said the words, "It's fine." So that's what he hears. And he says, "Great. Thanks for understanding," and goes back to watching TV. And you're sitting there shocked, hurt, angry because he didn't push. He didn't ask if you were really okay. He didn't notice you were upset. And from that moment on, you're cold. You give short answers at dinner. You don't cuddle on the couch like you usually do. You go to bed without saying goodnight. And the whole time, you're waiting. You're waiting for him to notice something's wrong. You're waiting for him to ask what he did. You're waiting for him to figure out he hurt you. But he doesn't. He has no idea because you told him it was fine. And he believed you because why wouldn't he? So Friday comes, you're still upset, still waiting for him to notice. He asks if you want to watch a movie. You say, "I don't care." He can tell something's off, so he asks, "Are you okay?" And you say, "I'm fine." Again, you're lying again. And he accepts the lie again because you said the words. And now you're even more hurt, even more convinced he doesn't care, even more resentful, all because you won't use your words and tell him what's actually wrong. This is the pattern. This is what you do, and you're destroying your marriage with it. Because here's what's really happening. You're creating tests. Every time you say "I'm fine" when you're not, you're testing him. You're testing to see if he'll push past your words and read your mind. You're testing to see if he cares enough to dig deeper. You're testing to see if he knows you well enough to see through the lie. And when he doesn't pass the test, when he accepts "I'm fine" at face value, you use that as evidence he doesn't really know you. He doesn't really care. He's not emotionally intelligent enough. But here's what you're missing. He's not failing a test. You're setting him up to fail a test he doesn't even know he's taking. You're lying to him and then punishing him for believing you. You're expecting mind reading abilities he doesn't have, and you're using his normal, reasonable response to your words as proof of his inadequacy. That's manipulative. That's unfair. And that's on you. Now I know what you're thinking. But Dr. Phil, he should know me well enough to tell when I'm upset. He should care enough to push past I'm fine. A good husband would notice when something's wrong. And you know what? Maybe in a perfect world he would. Maybe in a perfect world, husbands would be trained to see through every deflection and read every subtle cue. But we don't live in a perfect world. We live in the real world where your husband is a human being, not a mind reader. And here's something else you need to hear. Men and women communicate differently. That's not sexist. That's not stereotyping. That's biology and socialization. Women tend to pick up on emotional cues more easily. You notice tone. You notice body language. You notice when someone's energy is off. You're socialized from childhood to be attuned to other people's feelings. Men generally aren't. They tend to take words at face value. If you say you're fine, they believe you're fine. That's not a defect. That's not them being insensitive. That's just how they're wired. So when you expect your husband to communicate like a woman, to pick up on hints, to read between the lines, to push past your words to your real feelings, you're expecting something he's not equipped to do. And then you're blaming him for not meeting an expectation you never clearly communicated. You're holding him to a standard he doesn't even know exists, and that's not fair. Let me give you another example. Your husband comes home from work, you've had a terrible day, the kids were a nightmare, the house is a mess, you're exhausted and overwhelmed, and he walks in and immediately starts talking about his day, about his problems at work, about what he needs for tomorrow. He doesn't ask about your day. He doesn't notice you're at the end of your rope. He just starts unloading on you, and you're crushed. You needed him to see you were struggling. You needed him to ask how your day was. You needed him to offer to help, but he didn't. So what do? You shut down. You give minimal responses. You start slamming things around in the kitchen. And when he finally notices you seem off and asks what's wrong, you say, nothing. I'm fine. And you wait. You wait for him to connect the dots. You wait for him to realize you're not fine. You wait for him to apologize for not asking about your day. But he doesn't, because you said you're fine. So he goes back to talking about work, and now you're furious and hurt and feeling completely unseen. And you use this as more evidence that he doesn't care about you, that he's selfish, that he takes you for granted. But here's the reality. He didn't know. You didn't tell him. You expected him to figure it out, and when he didn't, you blamed him for your choice to stay silent. Here's what I need you to understand about this pattern. It's not just that it doesn't work, it's that it actively destroys your marriage. Every time you do this, every time you lie about being fine, wait for him to notice, and then resent him for not reading your mind, you're creating distance. You're building a wall. You're teaching him that you're not trustworthy because you say one thing but mean another. You're teaching him that he can't win with you because no matter what he does, it's wrong. And you're teaching yourself that he doesn't care, even though the real problem is that you won't communicate. Let me tell you about a woman I worked with. We'll call her Jennifer. Jennifer had been married for 12 years, and she came to me because she felt completely disconnected from her husband. She said he didn't understand her. He didn't notice when she was upset. He didn't care about her feelings. And when I asked her to give me examples, every single one followed the same pattern. She'd be upset about something. He'd ask what was wrong. She'd say nothing. He'd believe her. And then she'd be hurt that he believed her. I asked Jennifer when she started expecting her husband to be a mind reader, and she got defensive. She said she wasn't expecting mind reading. She just wanted him to know her well enough to see when she was lying, to care enough to push past her defenses, to love her enough to fight for the truth. And I said, Jennifer, you're not asking him to know you. You're asking him to ignore your words and guess at your feelings. That's not love. That's a game, and it's a game he's always going to lose. And that hit her because she'd never thought of it that way. She thought waiting for him to notice was somehow more romantic, more proof of love. Like if he really cared, he'd just know. But what she was really doing was avoiding vulnerability. She was avoiding the scary work of actually saying how she felt. Because if she said, that hurt my feelings, and he dismissed it or didn't respond well, then she'd have to face that rejection directly. But if she just waited for him to notice and he didn't, she could tell herself he didn't know. It wasn't real rejection, it was just him being oblivious. And that's what a lot of you are doing. You're using this waiting game as protection. As long as you don't say how you feel, you can't be rejected. As long as you don't communicate directly, you don't have to risk him not caring. You can stay in this safe place of he doesn't know instead of facing the scarier possibility that he knows and doesn't prioritize it the way you want. So you hide behind I'm fine and blame him for not seeing through it. But here's what that's costing you. It's costing you intimacy. Because intimacy requires vulnerability and honesty. It's costing you connection because connection requires real communication. It's costing you the relationship you actually want because you're so busy playing games and testing him that you're not actually building anything real. Let me show you what else this looks like. You do something nice for your husband. Maybe you make his favorite dinner. Maybe you do something thoughtful. And you don't just do it to be nice. You do it hoping he'll reciprocate, hoping he'll notice and do something nice for you in return. But he doesn't. He thanks you for dinner and goes back to watching TV. Or he appreciates the gesture but doesn't think to return it. And you're crushed. Because in your mind, he should know that when you do something nice, you're hoping for reciprocation. He should just get it. But he doesn't get it because you didn't say it. You had an unspoken expectation, and he failed to meet an expectation he didn't know existed. And now you're upset with him for something he couldn't possibly have known. That's not fair. That's not communication. That's you creating secret rules and being mad when he breaks them. Or here's another one. You're feeling disconnected. You want more quality time, more attention, more affection. But instead of saying, hey, I'm feeling disconnected from you, can we plan a date night this week? You just drop hints. You mention how nice it would be to go out. You sigh when he's watching TV instead of talking to you. You pull away when he tries to be affectionate because you're hurt he hasn't prioritized you. And the whole time you're waiting for him to notice you're pulling away, waiting for him to initiate the connection you're craving. But he doesn't because he doesn't know you're waiting. He just knows you seem off and you said you're fine. And with every day that passes, you get more resentful, more convinced he doesn't care, more certain that if he loved you, he'd know what you need. But love doesn't make people psychic. Love doesn't give someone the ability to read minds. And expecting your husband to know what you need without you telling him is setting both of you up to fail. Now, let me address something. Some of you are thinking, but I have told him multiple times, and he still doesn't notice. And I'm going to ask you, what did you actually say? because I'm willing to bet you didn't communicate as clearly as you think you did. You probably said something vague like, I wish we spent more time together, or it would be nice if you helped more. Those aren't clear requests, those are hints. Clear communication sounds like this: I need us to have a date night once a week, just the two of us, no phones. Can we commit to that starting this Friday? That's clear. That's direct. That's something he can actually respond to. Or maybe you did communicate clearly once 5 years ago, and you expected him to remember and act on it forever. But people need reminders. Needs change. What you needed 5 years ago might not be what you need now. So if you communicated something once and he's not doing it, you need to communicate it again, not as an attack, not as proof he doesn't listen, just as a clear, current request. But most of you aren't doing that. Most of you are dropping hints, making vague statements, saying I'm fine when you're not, and then blaming him for not decoding your secret messages. And that's not his failure. That's yours. Let me give you some more specific examples of what this looks like, because I think you need to see yourself in these patterns before you'll believe you're doing it. You're out with another couple. The husband makes a comment that slightly embarrasses you. Nothing huge, just a little jab about something you did. Everyone laughs, including your husband, but you're hurt. You feel like he should have defended you, like he should have shut it down instead of laughing along. So what happens? You get quiet, you pull back from the conversation, you're physically there but emotionally gone, and your husband can feel the shift. Something changed. But when you get in the car to go home and he asks if you're okay, what do you say? I'm fine. And he says, you seem upset. And you say, I'm not, I'm just tired. Lie number two, and he accepts it because you gave him an explanation that makes sense, and you drive home in silence, fuming, waiting for him to connect the dots, waiting for him to realize what he did wrong. But he doesn't connect the dots because you gave him a different explanation. You said you were tired. So he's thinking about how late it is and that you both should get to bed, while you're sitting there building a case about how he doesn't defend you, how he values his friend's opinion more than your feelings, how if he really loved you, he'd know you're not tired, you're hurt. And by the time you get home, you've built this whole story in your head, and he's completely oblivious to all of it. Or here's another one. It's your birthday. You've been dropping hints for weeks about this necklace you saw. You showed him the website. You mentioned how much you loved it. You even sent him the link just in case he wanted ideas, but your birthday comes and he gets you something else, something thoughtful but not the necklace, and you're crushed. Because in your mind, you made it so obvious. You basically told him exactly what you wanted. How could he miss it? But here's the thing, you didn't tell him. You hinted, and hints get missed. Maybe he saw 5 other things you mentioned and thought any of them would be good. Maybe he forgot which specific item was the one. Maybe he wanted to surprise you with something different. But you're not thinking about any of that. You're thinking he doesn't listen. He doesn't care. If he paid attention, he'd have known. So what do? You open the gift, you say thank you. But your face shows disappointment. Your voice lacks enthusiasm, and he can tell something's off. So he asks, do you not like it? And you have a choice. You can say, I appreciate this, but I was really hoping for that necklace I showed you. Or you can say, no, I love it, thank you, and protect his feelings while sacrificing your honesty. Which one do you choose? You say you love it, you lie. And then you spend the rest of the day low-key resentful that he didn't get you what you wanted. What you clearly communicated by dropping hints. Here's what you're not seeing. Every time you do this, every time you say one thing but mean another, you're training him. You're teaching him that your words don't match your feelings, that what you say isn't trustworthy, that he needs to decode and interpret instead of just listening. And over time, that creates massive dysfunction in your communication because he stops knowing when to believe you and when to dig deeper. So sometimes he accepts I'm fine when you're not, and sometimes he pushes when you actually are fine, and you get mad that he doesn't trust you. He can't win because you've made the rules inconsistent. Let me talk about what this does to intimacy. Because intimacy, real intimacy, requires vulnerability and honesty. It requires you to be seen, really seen, for who you are and what you feel. But you can't be seen if you're hiding, and that's what you're doing when you say, I'm fine. You're hiding, you're putting up a wall. You're protecting yourself from the risk of rejection or dismissal. But in protecting yourself, you're also blocking connection. Your husband can't connect with the real you if you won't show him the real you. He can't comfort you if you won't admit you're hurt. He can't change behavior if you won't tell him what's bothering you. He can't love you well if you keep lying about what you need. So every time you choose self-protection over honesty, you're choosing distance over intimacy, and you're doing it on purpose. And then you wonder why you feel disconnected. And here's another thing this does. It creates resentment on both sides. You're resentful because you feel unseen and misunderstood. But he's resentful too. He's resentful that nothing he does is right, that you're constantly upset about things he didn't know were problems, that he's walking on eggshells, trying not to trigger unspoken expectations. That's not a partnership. That's a minefield. Let me give you another scenario. You've been feeling overwhelmed. Work is stressful. The house is a mess. The kids need a million things. You're exhausted, and your husband seems oblivious. He comes home, relaxes, plays with the kids for 10 minutes, and then does his own thing. Meanwhile, you're drowning. You need help. You need support. You need him to step up. But do you say that? No. You just get more and more tense, more short with him, more snippy. You slam cabinets. You sigh heavily. You make pointed comments about how much you have to do. And he can tell you're upset. So he asks, what's wrong? What can I do to help? And you say, nothing. I'm fine. I've got it. Because in your mind, if he really cared, he'd see what needs to be done and just do it. You shouldn't have to ask. He should want to help. The fact that he's asking proves he doesn't really see you. But here's what's actually happening. He's asking because he wants to help but doesn't know what you need. You're overwhelmed about 15 different things, and he has no idea which ones are most important or how he can actually be useful. So he's asking for direction, and you're refusing to give it because you've decided that needing to ask for help means the help doesn't count. It's not real support if you have to spell out what you need. And that's insane. That's you creating an impossible standard. Nobody is psychic. Nobody can look at you and know exactly what would help without asking. And you punishing him for asking, for trying to meet your needs, is pushing away the exact thing you're claiming you want. You want help, but you won't tell him how to help. So he doesn't help the way you want, so you get more resentful, and the cycle continues. Let me tell you what this pattern does long term, because if you keep this up for years, and a lot of you have, it fundamentally changes your relationship. Your husband learns that you're unpredictable, that you say one thing but mean another, that he can't trust your words. So he stops asking what's wrong because you always say nothing anyway. He stops trying to decode your hints because he always gets them wrong and you get mad at him either way. He stops being emotionally present because every interaction is a potential trap. And you use his withdrawal as proof. See, He doesn't care. He's checked out. He doesn't ask how you are anymore. He doesn't notice when you're upset. He doesn't try, but you created this. You taught him that trying doesn't work, that asking doesn't get honest answers, that no matter what he does, you're going to be upset about something he didn't see coming. So he protected himself by caring less, by investing less, by expecting less. And now you're both in a marriage where nobody's happy, but nobody knows how to fix it because the foundation of communication is completely broken. Here's something else you need to hear. Your girlfriends are making this worse. I guarantee you've vented to your friends about this, about how your husband doesn't notice when you're upset, about how he doesn't read your cues, about how you have to spell everything out for him. And you know what your girlfriends say? Men are so clueless. He should just know you deserve better. If he really loved you, he'd pay attention. And that validates your perspective. It makes you feel justified in your resentment. It reinforces the idea that the problem is him, not your communication. But your girlfriends are wrong. They're wrong because they're women and they communicate like women. They pick up on hints. They read between lines. They notice subtle shifts in energy. So to them, your husband's inability to do those things seems like a deficiency, like he's not trying hard enough or doesn't care enough, but he's not deficient. He's just different. He communicates differently. And expecting him to communicate like a woman is as unfair as him expecting you to communicate like a man. So your girlfriends, with their well-meaning validation, are actually sabotaging your marriage. They're reinforcing patterns that don't work. They're making you feel righteous in your resentment instead of challenging you to communicate better. Real friends would say, "Why didn't you just tell him you were upset?" Real friends would push you to take responsibility for your part in the dysfunction. But most friends just validate and commiserate, and that keeps you stuck. Now, let me talk about the fear underneath all of this, because there's a reason you say I'm fine when you're not. There's a reason you wait for him to notice instead of speaking up. And that reason is fear. You're scared of his response. You're scared he'll dismiss your feelings. You're scared he'll think you're being too sensitive or dramatic. You're scared he won't care. So you protect yourself by not saying anything, by hiding behind, "I'm fine," by making him responsible for figuring out something you won't admit. But here's what you need to understand. By protecting yourself from the possibility of rejection, you're guaranteeing disconnection. Yes, there's a risk he might respond badly if you're honest about your feelings. He might minimize them. He might get defensive. He might not handle it the way you want. But there's also a chance he'll respond well, a chance he'll apologize, a chance he'll make changes, a chance he'll show up for you. But you'll never know because you won't take the risk. And even if he does respond badly, even if he dismisses or minimizes your feelings, at least then you know. At least then you have real information about whether this marriage can work. Right now you're in limbo. You're creating stories about why he doesn't notice. You're assuming he doesn't care, but you don't actually know because you haven't given him the chance to show you. You're so busy protecting yourself from potential rejection that you're guaranteeing actual disconnection. Here's what you need to do starting today. And I'm going to be very specific because vague advice doesn't help. The next time your husband asks what's wrong, you tell him the truth, even if it's scary, even if you're worried about his response. You say, "I'm upset because," and you finish that sentence honestly. You don't say you're fine. You don't deflect. You don't minimize. You just tell the truth. And when you tell the truth, you do it without attacking. You don't say, "You're so selfish you never notice when I'm upset." You say, "I'm upset because when you rescheduled our dinner without checking with me first, I felt like I wasn't a priority." You own your feelings, you describe the specific behavior, you don't make it about his character or intentions, just about your emotional response to his actions. And then, and this is crucial, you let him respond. You don't interrupt, you don't defend, you don't explain more, you just let him process what you said and respond. Maybe he apologizes, maybe he explains his perspective, maybe he gets defensive. Whatever he does, you let him do it and you stay in the conversation. You don't shut down if he doesn't respond perfectly. You work through it together. If he dismisses your feelings or minimizes them, you address that. You say, "When you tell me I'm being too sensitive, it makes me feel like my feelings don't matter to you." You give him a chance to course correct, to understand that his response is hurtful, even if that wasn't his intention. You stay in the conversation even when it's uncomfortable, because that's what real communication requires. Let me talk about what this does to your husband, because you're so focused on how hurt you are that he doesn't notice, but you're not thinking about what it's like to be him, to live with someone who says one thing but means another, to try to connect with someone who's constantly testing you with secret rules, to be punished for things you don't even know you did wrong. Your husband is confused. He asks what's wrong and you say nothing. He believes you, and somehow that's the wrong answer. He tries to help, but not in the way you wanted, so that's wrong too. He doesn't help because you didn't ask, and that's also wrong. No matter what he does, he's failing, and he has no idea how to win because you won't tell him what winning looks like. And over time, he's going to stop trying. He's going to stop asking what's wrong because you always say nothing anyway. He's going to stop trying to decode your hints because he always gets them wrong. He's going to emotionally check out because being present means being constantly criticized for things he doesn't understand. And then you'll use that withdrawal as more proof he doesn't care, when really he's protecting himself from a game he can't win. So here's what needs to happen. You need to stop this pattern right now, today. No more "I'm fine" when you're not fine. No more waiting for him to notice. No more dropping hints and expecting mind reading. No more testing him with secret expectations. You need to use your words like an adult, like a partner, like someone who actually wants their marriage to work. What does that look like? It means when he asks what's wrong, you tell him, not aggressively, not with blame, but honestly. "I'm upset because when you rescheduled our dinner, it felt like you were prioritizing golf over me, and that hurt." That's it. That's all you have to say. Give him the information, let him respond, let him make it right, or explain his perspective. Have an actual conversation instead of a guessing game. It means when you have a need, you state it clearly. "I need more help with the kids in the evenings. Can you take over bath time?" Not, "It would be nice if you helped more." Not sighing loudly while you do everything yourself. Not waiting for him to volunteer. Clear, direct requests. It means when you're hurt, you say so. "When you didn't ask about my day, I felt invisible." Not shutting down and waiting for him to figure out why you're mad. Not punishing him with silence. Not creating drama to force him to chase you. Just honest communication about your feelings. And I know this is hard. I know it feels vulnerable to say how you really feel. I know it's scary to risk him not responding the way you want, but you're already not getting what you want. Your current strategy isn't working. Waiting for him to notice isn't working. Dropping hints isn't working. Lying about being fine isn't working. So you've got nothing to lose by trying actual honesty. Here's what happened with Jennifer. After our conversation, she went home and had a real talk with her husband. She told him about the pattern, about how she'd been saying she was fine when she wasn't, about how she'd been waiting for him to read her mind. And she took responsibility for that. She didn't blame him for not being psychic. She acknowledged she'd been unfair, and then she told him what she needed. She needed him to know that when she's short with him or distant, something's probably wrong, even if she says she's fine. She needed him to gently push past, "I'm fine," one time. Just ask, "Are you sure?" And if she still said yes, then believe her, but give her one chance to tell the truth. And she committed that when he asked that second time, she'd be honest. Even if it was hard, even if it was scary. You know what her husband said? He was relieved. He'd known something was wrong for years, but he didn't know how to fix it. He thought she was just unhappy with him in some fundamental way he couldn't change, and learning that the problem was communication, that was something he could actually work on. They both could. It wasn't perfect overnight. She still had moments where she defaulted to, "I'm fine." He still missed some cues, but they were trying. They were actually communicating. And their marriage started to change, not because he became psychic, but because she stopped expecting him to be. And here's what else happened. As Jennifer started being more honest about her feelings, she realized something. A lot of the times she thought he didn't care, he actually did. He just didn't know what she needed. When she told him directly, "I need you to prioritize me over golf sometimes," he did. When she said, "I feel disconnected and I need us to have real conversations, not just logistics," he made an effort. He wasn't perfect, but he tried. And that trying, that effort, was what she'd been wanting all along. But she'd been so focused on him noticing on his own that she'd never given him the chance to show up when actually told what she needed. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying your husband has no responsibility here. I'm not saying he shouldn't pay attention or try to understand you. I'm not excusing men who are genuinely checked out or dismissive. But what I am saying is that you staying silent and waiting for him to notice isn't the answer. Even if he should be more attentive, even if he should pick up on cues better, your strategy of not communicating isn't working. And you're the only one who can change your strategy. You can spend the rest of your marriage being right about the fact that he should notice. You can tell all your friends how he doesn't pay attention. You can build a case about how if he really loved you, he'd just know. And you can be absolutely correct in all of that, but you'll still be unhappy, you'll still be disconnected, you'll still be living with resentment. Because being right doesn't fix the problem. Communication does. So you've got a choice. You can keep waiting for him to become the mind reader you want him to be, or you can start using your words like the adult you are. You can keep playing these games and watching your marriage slowly die, or you can start being honest and give it a real chance to work. Those are your options, and only you can decide which path you're going to take. So what are you going to do? Are you going to go back to dropping hints and waiting for him to notice? Are you going to keep saying, "I'm fine," when you're not? Are you going to keep creating emotional tests and getting mad when he fails them? Or are you going to finally start using your words because this is your choice? You can keep playing these passive-aggressive games and watch resentment destroy your marriage, or you can start communicating directly and honestly. Yes, it's scary to be vulnerable. Yes, it's hard to say what you need, but staying silent is harder. Building years of resentment is harder. Killing your marriage slowly with unexpressed feelings is harder. So choose the hard that leads somewhere better. Look, I'm here every day uploading content to help you break these destructive patterns. If this helped you see what you need to change, let me know by hitting that like button, leaving a comment, and subscribing so you don't miss tomorrow's video. He can't read your mind. Stop expecting him to